Hello there everybody and welcome to another Rainbow Six Siege demo review, and today we're going to be really honing in on what it means to be a good support player in 2022. Long gone are the days where you could sit back as Thatcher and smoke and hunker down and post up numbers that way. Now, in my opinion at least, you need to be a lot more proactive and aggressive and make sure you're really bouncing off your teammates. And I'm hoping that today that's what we're going to see in this demo. So here we are then, inside of the demo, and for this match we're going to be looking at Direwolves versus Knights, Playday 6 of Stage 2 for APAC South, and we're going to be watching Juicy's perspective from the Knights. In my opinion at least, one of the strongest supports we saw in Stage 2, always having an impact, seems to do a really good job of sort of coordinating the team, and has always, in my opinion, come across as really level-headed and has really good brains for the game as well. So let's hope that this demo is going to show us that perspective, and hopefully we can all learn a thing or two from this. I didn't cast the game, I haven't watched this demo yet at all, so I really don't know. We're going into uncharted territory in terms of what we can expect in this matchup. Looks like we're going over to Bathroom and Tellers for the first round in this game, and this was a very important matchup for both teams deep into the stage. Both were still vying for a spot at the major, so there's a lot of pressure on both rosters in this particular match. Now, as you can see, we're deep now into the action phase, and Juicy still doing setup, and this is, I think, one of the hardest things for a castle to get right, is really maximizing setup and making sure you get it done in time, but also not exposing yourself, because this early on you can sometimes be rushed, you can be aggressed upon, you have to be really careful, and Juicy is still getting to work with that super short. He's still creating angles for horizontal rotations, vertical pressure, now holding lines of sight as well. So despite playing on the castle with the UMP, one of the weakest guns in the game, he's still being proactive here and helping out the roster. Now, gets a good trade there to kick things off, right? So ED finds Quiz over towards Archives, but he's ready and waiting for that trade. Perhaps Quiz didn't need to be as aggressive there as he was to die, but nonetheless cleaned up nicely. And that's what we're going to see a lot of here, I'm assuming, on Border. A lot of really quick trades, a lot of fast-paced action. And unfortunately, the Knights roamers here are struggling a little bit, and Juicy not in a particularly strong position to find these trades, just being mindful that it doesn't get rushed from Teller's window. Repositions now over towards Mez, and this position here as an attacker is really, really strong. Personally, I don't like this as part of the Border rework, because trying to counter it as a defender is really challenging. You may see sometimes teams holding East Stairs, for example, early on in rounds to prevent Mez from being free real estate, but once it is lost, especially on a site like Tellers, it just puts so much pressure on players like Juicy, and I'm sure we'll see that sooner rather than later, as Direwolves are droning out that side of the map, and at this point in time, Juicy now needs to try and make a play, needs to try and find a play to bring the round back, otherwise it's going to be too difficult to salvage. He is given some breathing room over towards Workshop, and he does play into that nicely, using a lot of that setup that he had previously, but it does mean now that he's a long way away from site. With a minute to go, unfortunately, he hasn't been able to really have as much of an impact in this round as he probably would have liked. Rambe goes in for the plant. The hatch is opened up above, so Juicy is distracted and unable to play into that setup. Wouldn't have been able to deny it anyway. Yeah, and then gets caught off guard. So not really too much to take away there, I think, in the first round. The main positives really for Juicy was the fact that he was still able to execute his setup and get it done. Still also aided Quiz in the trade. And then really from no fault of his own, the rest of the round kind of slipped out of his hands. On to round 2 then, and we head up over towards Armory, and unless something stands out in the prep phase, I'm just going to go through it at 2x speed just so we can go through this VOD a little bit quicker. Juicy jumping onto the smoke, one of his most favoured operators in the game, alongside Habana on attack, so one that he's going to feel quite confident on. The one thing I am intrigued to see on this side is, yeah, one, where does he place the shield, and two, does he play off it a lot? He places it over towards that metal half-wall position. I think some teams call that Africa. We have our own call-outs for it. It's a bit of an awkward part of the site, but it's definitely an important one, as you can deny the Archives entry, the vault in as well. And despite it being important, it is obviously going to be quite difficult to hold. Okay, so Juicy jumps onto the vault cameras here. He's in a safe position to feed info to the team, and that's exactly what he is going to do. Very heavy roam here from the defense, so any information that they can get here is going to be really important. So good to see that Juicy's fulfilling that role, but also having the presence of mind not to just sit on cams the whole time. He knows that he's still in a dangerous position. He could be aggressed upon, especially if there aren't any other defenders directly on site. So something that he does have to be mindful of. Good pick there from Sage. In fact, I just want to double check that this actually is a Archives defense. Yes, it is. Okay. Didn't want to be wrong there. Yeah, he finds himself in a bit of an awkward position. There are two players outside of Archives. There is one as well on that CC Belk, and they've actually progressed in, and Juicy hasn't caught them. So the timing a little bit awkward, and Jackie Wu on the Finker has actually been able to somewhat sneak in here. Good spot though there from Juicy. So some good game sense there to read that Harambe is on those stairs outside, but he doesn't have the read on Jackie Wu. So we'll see how he manages to play this one out, but I would assume it's not going to be favorable for him. Still wins it though, so not a great peek there from Finker, who is going in blind, and some good composure there from Juicy. The SMG, of course, is an incredibly strong weapon, especially at really close range like that. Rate of fire is king in Siege. He puts that on display. Onto the end of the round then, and not too much has happened. Shots are fired over towards that CC Belk, and Juicy repositions. Now gets the shotgun out, and that's one of the key things when playing Smoke, is sort of knowing which weapon to use and when. Ball then goes out that there's the Ash behind, and the Knights clean up quite nicely. And yeah, good job there all around from Juicy. Did a good job in denying that Archives entry. Had a little bit to juggle that round and showed some good multitasking skills to make sure that he didn't sort of prioritize one thing over another. Into round 3 then, and we go to Vents, so another unique site here for the Knights, and Juicy actually jumping on to a more aggressive operator, considering he is the primary support for the team, jumping onto the Azami, interestingly enough. And that's a very popular operator in the current meta, one that you can definitely get away with as a more frag-oriented roamer, or if you wanted to play a more supportive role in using the barriers to aid teammates and put them in positions to make plays. So yeah, keen to see exactly how he does elect to use them. Looks like heavy emphasis over towards 90 here for the defense. Some barriers to help that, as well as CC. And Juicy actually looking to play first contact, and probably makes sense at the moment. Currently going 3-1. He's clearly pretty sharp at the start of this game. Feeling quite confident. And Border is a map where you need to contest map entry, not just map control, due to the nature of the map being quite small. Claustrophobic. Here's shots over towards Break, denies the drone. That's really well done. Now looks to play over towards this security room door. Can be very difficult to get a pinch on this position due to the nature of how the room's configured. You add in the Kiba barriers, and it's actually quite difficult to clear. No Hibana for Direwolves as well, so they're actually pretty encumbered here to deal with this. Juicy just continues to peek out in hopes of gaining information. You need to be careful here though. Finker up ahead. He hears the gun stick, so he should have a decent read that it is a Yana or a Finker. And he'll play a little bit more passive off that. It's been a good start for the Knights, and this is a position that the Knights won't want to throw away. Juicy gets a little bit lucky with his timing there, but again, using cover really nicely there behind the desk. He gets that kill, and yeah, that's the round basically done for the Knights. Go back over to bathroom for round number 4. So we see that full rotation come through, and we'll be looking to see now if the Knights and Juicy more specifically can have more of an impact in this round and perhaps turn things around. Again, big emphasis over towards 90 here for the Knights, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. And Juicy will place down these barricades, and again, all about managing that setup as well as he can. He can't get it all done before the end of the preparation phase. It's simply not physically possible, but he'll look to just get it done safely where he can. And it looks like in terms of the setup itself, very similar to the previous round. A lot of vert looking up above, the horizontal rotations established as well. And interestingly, using proxies as well for that front door push, which is probably honestly his biggest threat. Needs to be careful of the window as well. But positions himself well so that he can actually still continue to open up walls and complete his setup without risking being taken down. And that's the most important thing. If you're going to be doing preparation so deep into the action phase, it's about minimizing the chances that you do get caught off guard. He is very careful of the Talos window, and a nade actually going to be cooked, so we'll see if he survives it. Looks like he does, so I don't know if that was a bad nade. It was drained out by the defense. Juicy spots the player on the window. And again, he's just doing a really good job of playing Overwatch on site. The rest of the team is doing their role. They're preventing the map entry and they're playing quite well. Juicy now sees this as an opportunity while they have a strong man advantage and no site pressure to just quickly check drones and make sure that that none of his teammates rather are going to get caught off guard, and he can try to facilitate their plays. And now in the 4 versus 1, again, much like the last round, Juicy's just played it smart. He's had a quiet round, but often as a support, quiet rounds like this are better than hectic rounds. Round 5 now, and it definitely starts to feel at this point like the Knights are gaining some pretty serious momentum. The map denial from them has been really strong in the last couple of round wins. And in terms of Juicy's perspective, we actually haven't had to watch a whole lot of his work. Most of it has, again, just been that multitask on the setup and ensuring that site is being held. He tends to be the one primarily holding site against the majority of the push outside of the roam. So he's been doing a good job there and hasn't prevented too much map control, too much objective control rather, from being obtained. Again, we go up above, playing a very similar position behind that middle half wall, behind the deployable shield. And this is some really good stuff. Look at the amount of information Juicy has gathered here, 30 seconds into the action phase, because Direwolves haven't taken down the default camera. So he's been able to feed... How many cameras was it? So he still has the parking lot camera. He'll be able to call that that's clear, and that probably takes a little bit of pressure off this defender here. And then he gets this information over towards the parking lot entrance. Lots of information. I'm assuming he's going to spot this player here, might hear the one vents, definitely sees the one over towards passport. So that's several players on this part of the map that have been spotted. And we'll have a look at who's holding CC. I think it's probably Sage. Yeah, and Sage has a perfect read on this, and in fact almost gets a kill off it. So yeah, some really good work there from Juicy, and he just continues to sit this camera. Obviously, you're not going to get away with this every round, especially in competitive play. You shouldn't be. The camera really should be taken down, but Direwolves clearly just a little bit frazzled and make a pretty simple mistake in this instance. But Siege often is about exploiting those mistakes. And yeah, Juicy just has free information right now. He's been sitting on this camera for close to 30 seconds and doing a really good job. But also making sure that he doesn't just completely sit on it like last time. It's about juggling everything that you need to do. He gets up, makes sure archives isn't being pushed, gets straight back on that default cam, can continue to call out passport pressure, break door pressure. Will now call the passport entry. Quiz doesn't win the fight though, so that was a little bit unfortunate, and the trade as well doesn't quite land. So despite, I think in my opinion, Juicy doing a really good job here. Of course, we don't have insight into his comms and how good the calls were, but I'm just going to assume that they were solid. The Knights still unable to find those picks, and sometimes as a support player, especially if you're playing ranked and especially if you're playing solo queue, if you're going to be fulfilling a support role, you need to expect that sometimes, no matter what you do, you can make the best calls, you can make the smartest plays. If the players that should be posting up numbers aren't, you are going to find yourself in a rough spot. We'll see though if he can bring the round back. It's certainly not unwinnable from this perspective, and Sage with a massive 2k has now brought it back really close. And we might now finally see a bit of on-site play here, and potentially an execute coming through from Direwolves. Again, I can't quite remember. And Juicy's in a great spot. Still got 3 gas canisters, still got a strong position. He's already got the site prepared so that he can lob those canisters over for the archives plant. Is being mindful of information. Gets the drone. Simple as that. Really good read there. And that's whether or not he can remain composed in the post. Or in the plant, rather. There is some pressure below from the Knights. So some potential vert play from Josh on the Nitro. Don't know exactly where Sage is playing. He was last seen break. They might have some horizontal pressure here over towards Fountain. I was still being quite safe here and trying to drone again. Juicy prioritizes trying to find that drone, but on that instance he couldn't. Meanwhile, Ace has snuck through. He sees the barrel of the gun though. He likes not to get too aggressive though. Oh, makes the call. So I don't know exactly how that was... We'll go back and see exactly how that was denied.
Attackers need to locate
How did the...
bombs. 10 seconds to insertion.
I don't entirely understand how the Ace died there. Was it a friendly grenade?
The attacker's bomb diffuser has been dropped.
No, it was the Nitro. Okay, that makes more sense. So Josh, meanwhile, had that Nitro in hand, and as Juicy calls that they're going in for the plant, makes that call to him. So that's some really good, again, communication denial. Juicy doesn't get overly aggressive. He backs his teammate in to hit that. And again, just continues to peek the angle and send out canisters over towards default. Now gets the call that there actually is one in sight. Misses the trade. So just a little bit unlucky there. ED sneaking around there on the Nook. Obviously going to be a bit of a menace. And a little bit challenging while he's cloaked. Sage, though, has a big 3K. And now they can pinch for the 2v1. We'll see how just composed they are here. Juicy doesn't commit to the first pick. Then gets timed a little bit. Brings out the shotgun close range. So he's playing it pretty optimally at the moment. Again, tries to close down the range with the shotgun. And ED just pulls off a really nice play there with the deagle. So pretty hard, I think, to be critical of Juicy there. It was just a little bit awkward, I think, in the way in which it played out. Yeah, I think he just missed a couple of shots here or there, which does happen. And in terms of his overall position, I think he played it decently well. But again, I think it really highlighted the fact that as a support player, especially early round, sometimes the impact won't be felt, but his communication at the end really did make up for that. Really nice nitro on the denial, and maybe the round didn't hook up as nicely as it could have, but I don't think it was overall played that poorly. Round 6 now, and we jump back onto the Azami. So it seems to be pretty default here for Juicy on this site. Last time we saw a lot of setup over towards break, CC. Obviously the same again.
10 seconds left.
And
5 seconds.
probably a good opportunity to just remember that at this point in time, I think it'd be easy for a lot of players, including myself, to be still thinking about and still distracted by it and still annoyed that you lost that clutch that you should have won. It was a 2 versus 1. We should have won that. We threw the round. You need to be really smart in the way you think about that stuff mid-game. You almost need to just completely block it out. Of course, it's great to have it as a fresh reminder and quickly learn from it and how can we quickly improve it next time and perhaps just be a bit more composed, but it can't completely overwhelm your thinking, especially in a ranked game where the matches are so much shorter. If you get even just a little bit tilted and lose a round off it, your chances of winning drop dramatically. So I'll see if Juicy can sort of shake that off for this round. He is in a pretty important position over towards security and a pretty dangerous position. A lot of entries where grenades can be lobbed in. Does a really good job again to prioritize drones. That's something we've seen a lot of. Thinks about plugging up the hole here at 90 with the Kiba and commits to it. So that's a good use of those barriers, especially against an ace. Gets thrown out again, but just does a small reposition to try and make his presence a little bit difficult to detect. Engages with Harambe, then backs off. It wouldn't be favorable to repeat that, so I think that was well played. Continues to reposition to avoid the grenades, and in fact gets a kill off the back of it. So well done there by Juicy. Of course, he gets taken down immediately, but that's the nature of Border, and I think being able to find at least 1 kill around is a pretty good standard, especially if it's an impactful. We move on to the attacking half now, so 3-3 at the end of the half. Pretty even. Both teams had good and bad rounds respectively, and now we get to see Juicy on the attack. And for me, watching supports on attack is probably my biggest interest and what I think we'll learn the most from. Juicy loves playing the Habana role. That's what he's most known for. And we'll see what he's able to achieve in this round. Let's have a look at the drone work. So firstly, he had one pre-placed outside east stairs and gets a second one in this cheeky spot over towards office. So both really strong drone positions, not too unexpected or new. Uses that one over towards east to get some good early information and actually gets it all the way into 90. So that's a really, really powerful drone there. And I don't think Divers would expect one to be there, especially this early on in the round. So he can feed a lot of information on rotations off the back of that, and that's certainly going to help out the rest of his team. I don't know why the demo is completely glitching out right now. So hopefully it fixes itself in the next round maybe, but you can see, again, spots 2 players in office, he can call that out. That's really important information, and Divers have like 0 idea. They're not going to hear the drone from up here, so it's really well done. Josh gets a pick. But now the Knights have the advantage. And Juicy, minute 20 to go in the round, still holding drones. Still holding drones. Crazy. but it doesn't really matter. His team has the advantage. He's feeding really good information. He's trying to facilitate a play there inside of archives. Eventually, his time expires on drones, and he figures it's better he actually gets a gun up here and tries to help perhaps clear some of this up. He spots out that east is being held. Doesn't really have the network with him of operators to try and deal with that, so it's probably wise he doesn't go for this. So we'll see exactly what he does in this position. Again, hops back on that drone 90 just to spot if this entry is clear, and it will be. And the rest of the team has done really good work. A lot of that off the information he got before. Juicy having a inkling that there is someone over towards the east, but won't commit to it. Souffle was there, but Juicy prioritizes going for the plant. And it might sound a little bit obvious to many players, but in a situation like this, it is still losable if you prioritize the wrong wing conditions. And in this instance, especially if the rest of the team has relayed that site's clear, you're much better off going for plant than going for the pick, of course. That's exactly what he does. He drops down the hatch. He'll look to get in towards site, being covered by his teammates. Those rotations up above are being cut off, and he'll get this easy plant down above for the post. We'll see what position he actually plays in the post if it gets to that. It just holds over towards the west. Probably main stairs, I would assume. Defender is pinched over towards Mez, and they get the kill. So yeah, some really good work there from Juicy, highlighting that getting really good pre-plays drones is very, very important. And secondly, don't be afraid to sit on drones for long durations if you have the confidence in your teammates to really feed well off that information and find the entries. Into round 8 then, and it's the second attack for the Knights. They have the lead. They're probably feeling quite confident after that first attack. It was really quite strong. And this is pretty interesting. We're actually going to see Juicy just straight up pre-place his drone over towards the spawn. And I'm assuming this might be to try and get that drone a bit quicker in towards office. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's certainly... There's two ways of pre-placing drones, and often if players don't move their drones at all, it's just because they're AFK and lazy and don't care. But you can actually manipulate it to your advantage. There's plenty of maps where it's actually safer and faster to pre-place a drone at your feet and then lob it into the map. Like Cafe is probably a good example. Coastline Roof perhaps would be another, where you can pre-place a drone better to your advantage at your feet and then throw it over. So we'll see exactly what Juicy actually does do in this round. And yeah, it does exactly that. So it's going to be the same drone as last time. Yeah, really well played. Also again, Juicy jumping on drones pretty relentlessly here, trying to spot out players and find openings on the map for his team. Spots out that east is being occupied, so we'll see how they play off that. Flashbangs do go out. Maybe a nade. Wonder if that was to clear the mute jammer. If it was, that's pretty intriguing. And it allows Juicy now to scout out east stairs. They'll spot that it's clear, so that's actually a really good feed of information from Juicy to the rest of the team. And they're probably set up to try and take that position, flush out 90 a little bit. Needs to be mindful though of break, and Juicy is watching that. They lose the first pick though, so we'll see how reactive they play off that. And I don't think Juicy will be allowed to be as persistent on his droning this round. It's simply not viable. Still outside with a minute to go. He's being very cautious. So if they get to second, so it's not looking good for the Knights, but it does get traded. Big thing to keep in mind as well is Echo is in play at the moment, and I think that's giving a lot of information to Direwolves. The Knights don't really have the tools to deal with it. X-Kairos used here over towards 90. Juicy repositions. Again, has the diffuser. Has great plant stats. Slow peeks in towards security. Does actually catch a player off guard, so that's well played. He didn't make a lot of noise, so he didn't give away his position. And now just probably deciding whether they go for CC or office. I'm assuming he's vaulted and then vaulted back because Josh has indicated that Fountain and office are quite clear and he's been able to take that. So that then initiates Juicy to make a play. That's only what I'm guessing off what we're seeing. And again, that's probably another good tip as a support is you shouldn't always feel the need or feel the entitlement almost to be the one that has to make calls and only your calls matter. If another player on your team, especially if you're playing in a stack, sees an opening, makes a play, you're better off trying to play off that and working together instead of splitting and doing your own thing. We'll see. That's exactly what it does. Juicy does come across. Doesn't really have time to open up the wall, I don't think. So they're going to have to sort of blind peek site or shoulder peek site and try and find these picks. Doesn't really work out. Although Stiggs with the LMG has been allowed to get through. So we'll see if this round actually does work out. But yeah, no time in the end. So I think the only big thing there for the Knights was they kind of struggled to find that opening fast enough. And if Juicy had an extra 10-15 seconds to get across, open up the wall, would have made things pretty interesting. But he obviously had his hands tied, and a couple of players did die earlier. Into round number 9 then, and we move forward into the action phase. Juicy on this occasion playing the ace, and he'll make his way over towards detention. Now the wall can't initially be opened up. I think that would be because of the mute. So again, let's just see how they play around it. Juicy again, really showing a good ability to multitask. His primary focus is detention, but he's still sitting on drones for players up above on CC. So he's got a lot on his hands at the moment. And we'll see exactly how he does over that as best he can. Gets a good call onto office for quiz. Still sits that camera security. I think maybe they want control above so that they can then clear the mute jammer maybe. But there is a player there. Castle. Maybe that's in armory. Hard to tell. Hard for us to tell. Juice is going to confirm it for us. Spots out that armory is in fact clear. And that's the kind of map control that you want and that you need on a border. Spots one top metal. Does a good job to save the drone for a little bit. Jacoby does die, so that castle... Oh, has been spotted out. Almost thought that was a defender there for a moment. Obviously wasn't. Josh gets another pick and Juicy repositions, using that Salma again to expose in towards customs, but it has been muted out. So Juicy's impact this round has actually not been much outside of the droning, but that did facilitate a couple of picks and some map control around the map, so that kind of cancels itself out. I think they're still pretty keen to open up this wall. And I think Sage has placed a breach up above to get it, so that's some good teamwork. That'll eventually open up the Salmas, so they do get that ticked off, but there's only about 15 seconds to go, so let's see how Juicy plays the late round here. Is it 3 versus 1? 10 seconds to go. He has the diffuser. It's all about going for the kill in this instance, and that's what they do. Sharp shot over towards metal. And look, not the cleanest round. It took a long time for detention to get open, but in the meantime, Juicy did a good job of facilitating plays elsewhere. And I think that's a thing that a lot of supports sometimes do. I do it all the time myself, is you get so fixated on one particular job or one particular wall you want to open or one particular person you want to kill that you kind of forget to look at the bigger picture. And Juicy showed in that round why it's really important to do that. 4-5 now the scoreline, so things are getting really close, and the Knights will want to try and get match point here as quickly as possible. Again, not sacrificing drones. As I say that, he loses a drone, so probably a little bit overzealous there with the East Airs pick. And that was something that Juicy was doing really good up until that point, was keeping his drones and using them really well throughout the round. So maybe we can see now, is he able to adapt off that? Now when he has one drone to man himself. Obviously he can flick through other people's drones, but won't be able to move them. It's a default one again here on the roof. And you'll spend some time flicking through teammate drones once more. Spots one fountain. And you can see how powerful this drone is. It's not a new drone. People have been doing it for a while, but certainly some feedback for Direwolves and for any team playing this map is to make sure that you really do thoroughly check that, because I'm sure every team is, or a lot of teams are doing this.
A bomb has been located.
You see they're almost finding a kill. This is a pretty dangerous engagement to be taking over towards East Stairs. He has been spending quite a bit of time flicking the drones to get information, but he doesn't really have anyone helping him here. Just needs to be careful. Keeper barriers aren't going to help. Sledge now comes along to actually aid Juicy now, who aggresses the drone. Spots out that the rest of office is pretty clear. Going down though means they need to be really careful. They'll cook some flashbangs to help burn the util, but there's no grenades here close by, I don't believe, unless Josh is close, but I don't think he is. Stigs feels the need to make a bit of a play. East is clear, and that's confirmed by Juicy on the call down below, so they get that control. Just making sure that no one's in a wrap position below. That's well done. Juicy needs to be careful though, there is still a player inside of break. He has the diffuser. Stigs will cut off that angle for now, but the Knights only have 3 drones left, so it's quite a difficult position, so I'm keen to see if they're able to navigate their way out of this one. They see there's an opening over towards waiting, the wall's open, that castle barricade actually offers them a little bit of protection on the entry if they trade out the pick on site. Juicy tries to be quiet, but not quiet enough, and Stigs wasn't close enough to trade. So it does bring us into 1 versus 1. We'll see who ends up winning it out.
15 seconds left.
Yeah, ED there with the vert up above. I think that was the player inside of break. So pretty hard to get a takeaway from that. I think if Juicy and the Knights wanted to clear East stairs, perhaps having a bit more aid there would be helpful. But we've seen time and time again that position on East stairs is really, really tough to clear. But fundamentally, as a support, I think he was doing a good job in juggling the drone work. And despite losing one early, still had quite a bit of information available. On towards match point now for the Knights, and it looks like Darwals are finally clued into that office drone and are trying to counter it, so Juicy can't be as aggressive with it. Finds himself posted up outside events again to do good drone work. Important takeaway is if you are going to drone, make sure you're doing it in a safe position. He can't get run out from there. Well, I mean, he could, but it'd be a stretch. So just making sure you are droning in very safe positions, and here on board specifically, this is a good one. Man down now for the Knights. They desperately want match point. Well, both teams really desperately want match point, so pressure is mounting. We'll see how Juicy performs under that pressure. Locking down break room again. Trying to drone, but the mute jam is once more causing some issues. Spots out that mirror, who was aware of the drone before. Just helping to cut off this rotation at the moment to help his team over towards East, but he loses the fight. Now, I do wonder if there's perhaps a better way to try and cut off this rotation. I mean, it's easier said than done. I'd say that maybe you could upside down rappel on it. I don't know if that would be particularly strong there. It's just a tough one here for Juicy. He's trying to do a really important job of preventing those players from re-aggressing to the players over here on the east. But yeah, just loses out a gunfight, and you know what, sometimes that does happen. The Knights still managed to win out that last round, and Juicy now going 9-6 into the final round of this match. The Knights do end up closing it out, and it's an Archives attack to conclude things. Been a solid map for Juicy so far. He's done a really good job staying alive. He's got the second best survivability on the team alongside, well, he has the best equal with Josh. It looks like maybe he's trying to think about setting up for an Archives push at the moment. The wall actually reinforced between sites, which is interesting from Direwolves, and perhaps that's why Knights have made the call to try and exploit that. Good drone there inside of security to spot out mute. And you can see already orange outlines going over towards that position to maybe pressure this. See if it does work out. And there you go. So really well done by Juicy. A great drone. Was it his drone? I think he moved it. He moved it, didn't he? So that was his drone. Gets the team a kill. So really well done. I know that alleviates a lot of pressure the rest of the round now. The customs drone in that position, probably not going to do too much. So I think he was thinking about repositioning that elsewhere, but then Quiz gets a pick. So maybe bumps that down the priority list a little bit. Now focus is on the plant. No one's on the vent window yet, but there will be in a moment.
Drop the bomb.
And yeah, just a little bit mistime there. So Sage
Attackers need to
wasn't in a
locate and
position
defuse
there
bomb.
to prevent
10
that
seconds left
swing.
before insertion. 5 seconds left.
The Sledge was covering his swing, but Sage was not quite in a position to cover
Attackers have located a bomb.
Juicy there.
Attackers dropped the
And
diffuser.
it's difficult to pin blame on anyone because, again, don't have comms, but from what we're seeing here, I think Juicy perhaps just getting a little bit antsy and going forward a little bit too much without that coverage. And as a support player, often you're the one offering the coverage to other players, so it can be a bit awkward being in a position where you're trying to get covered, especially for a plant. It's just ensuring that that is linked up and making sure that you can't get swung from a position where you shouldn't be. At the very least, Juicy should have been gun up ready to go instead of flashing. And then in best case scenario, let's say Sage was there and missed him or whatever, and he didn't kill him, then Juicy could have, or vice versa. So yeah, I think that will conclude this video. I hope there were some takeaways from this. Again, it's not the greatest support game of Siege ever played by any stretch, but I think it shows a good example of, one, how important multitasking is in Siege at the moment. You can't just be on drones all the time, or you can't just be holding an angle the whole time. You need to be able to balance all of that at the moment. And the second, I think, key takeaway was really just the survivability of Juicy. He rarely put himself in positions where he was in an unfavorable fight. And often the gunfights that he did lose were either off the back of a trade or maybe just some misalignment with the team. Certainly some takeaways for me. Border is a very, very aggressive and difficult map to be a dedicated hard support on. But I think Juicy showed examples, especially on attack, where you can still get it done with some really good drone work. So that will conclude things. I hope you enjoyed the video. Like, subscribe, do all that, and I'll see you all next one.